We're continuing on Hachanah. Hachanah, we started on, I don't remember what day it was. We're continuing Hachanah, and we said that we're going to discuss most particularly washing the dishes. So in the previous year, we spoke about the heter of the Mishnah Berurah, that Safek Hachanah is mutter. Said the Mishnah Berurah that if it's a vadei Hachanah, you're vadei preparing, you're certainly preparing for during the week, it's a problem. But any time which it is not a certainty, if you might use some of the dishes, then it is okay. And from there we learned out that if you're going to wash the plates on a Friday night, you're not going to have an issue as long as you use some of them. And I mentioned this is not a heter of harama, of tricking. That's not. You're actually planning on using some of the plates. The question just is, how many? That is where the Mishnah Berurah says, if you're vadei not going to do it, then it's a problem. But if not, there's room to be mekel, which is what Rosh Zalman said. Just a parenthetical point about doing harama. Are you allowed to do harama? There is an Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan is discussing rolling a Sefer Torah for the next day. Yontif, one day to the next, let her roll the Sefer Torah to the next day. So the answer is no. Why not? Because it's Hachanah. Which, by the way, you see that there, even for a Seirach Mitzvah, there's no heter of Hachanah. Okay, very good. But says the Aruch HaShulchan, you know what you could do? As you're rolling the Torah, you could read in the Torah a little bit. And someone uses Aruch HaShulchan as a heter for a Rama. That we see that you want to wash all the dishes, you could take one dish, put a apple on it, take off the apple and eat it and put away the dish. So there's two reasons why that's ridiculous. Number one is taking an apple, putting it on a plate is not called using the plate at all. It's not using the plate. So you'll tell me, okay, fine, I'll actually eat something on the plate. Okay, maybe. So that would be a debatable point. If you actually use the plate, would it work? We have to actually use it. That would be a debate. Whether this Aruch HaShulchan is a source, some want to say no. Why not? He says explicitly that you could read from the Torah. Some want to say when it comes to learning Torah, you can't bring a raya to that. Similarly, you can't use a shul as a shortcut, but if you sit down and you learn a pasuk and you say a mishnah, then it's allowed. What, it's a joke? The answer is no, because the overwhelming gain of learning a pasuk, learning a mishnah, thinking a moment in Torah, wins over everything else. So maybe that's all the Aruch HaShulchan means, is that if you're Lamaisa going to say an extra pasuk of Torah, then it makes all the world of a difference. So whether haram is a good idea or not, we're going to leave on this side. So now what we'd like to continue is what do you do with the cutlery? You have your forks, your knives, your spoons. This is a personal favorite of mine, because this is how you see that with a dot of knowledge, it changes the world. So what do? You go, you wash your forks, your knives, your spoons, you wash them all, you pile them up on the side, they're sitting on the towel drying. Wonderful. And now you say, I want to set the table for tomorrow. What's the problem? The problem is you have a pile of forks, knives, and spoons. That's called bayrer, to separate forks, knives, and spoons, even though they're all cutlery, but they have different functions explicitly. Now, someone might remember that at a time that we mentioned that certain items share functions. For example, maybe a big fork and a little fork, maybe one could say there's no difference between two-sized forks. Perhaps, maybe one could say even in a big spoon and a small spoon, maybe one could say that they'll eat their soup with a small spoon. Perhaps, whether that's normal or not, we'll leave that. But if you have a whole pile of forks, knives, and spoons, everyone will agree, or should agree, I shall say, that they're definitely different functions, and therefore would be an isser of bayrer to set the table Friday night for Shabbos day conclusively across the board. I will mention, I say conclusively, if there is an Aruch HaShulchan that seems to maybe make mention that cutlery is not included in bayrer, but the pashtus is that's a mistake in the way of learning the Aruch HaShulchan. He does not mean that, and we'll just leave that on the side. Excuse me, as a tzarech iyon, if one wanted to use that as a raya. So what's the answer? What's the answer? Is there an answer? So the first answer is don't set it Friday night. Shkoyach. Shabbos day before the Suda. You said it. How much before the Suda? During the regular amount of time to prepare for the meal, Shabbos day, you're allowed to do bayrer for the meal. That's the condition of samach. We always have three conditions. Miyad, biyad, and eichel metech pselis. So using your hand as you separating them, it's eichel metech pselis, yes, because they're all eichel, you're just different functions. But is it miyad for immediate consumption? So if you're doing it to set the table right before you set the table, then you would fulfill that condition as well. But the problem is you don't want to do that. You want to go to your shul, your wife wants to go to shul, you want to come home and you want to have the table set. Is there any way out of it? This is a absolutely beautiful discussion. There's a taz. There's a taz. Yeah? Yeah. Well, what would be the problem without bayrer? Oh, very good. So we remind ourselves, very good. Let's remind ourselves that there is no issue in the world of Hachanah, there is no issue of preparing from Shabbos to Shabbos itself. From one Shabbos to the next Shabbos, that's a large discussion. But from Shabbos to Shabbos itself, within the Shabbos, there would be no issue. So now we have the question, what about Bayer? So there's a Taz, and I read you the following Taz, is in Shin Yud Tes Sifkatan Beis. Says the Taz, you know what you could do? He says that it's mashal from the Marshal, that there's Bayer, the Ish Bezem Mishabreira, the Kim Sheish Kan Chashash Isser Daraisa, Yesh Lahachmir, Afilu Min Echad, 1 second, excuse me. Only to take Rakshahu right to Lechol Ata. Okay, I didn't say anything yet. Oi, here it is. Sheyikach Stam Min Haba Biyadai. You should take Stam, what comes to your hand, La'aniach L'Suda Acheres, to leave for a different Suda, Loi B'derech Breira, not by sorting. So the Taz seemingly says, and some want to quote the Taz, that if you just take Stam, I have a pile of cutlery over here. So what do? I don't look. I stick my hand. I pick up something. I look at it. Oh, it's a fork. Now I'm allowed to walk to the table and put it down by the fork. I stick my hand in and I pick up a knife. Now I can walk and put it by the knife. I stick my hand in. I pick up another fork and put it by the fork. Why is that ridiculous? Yeah?
Could you pick up a whole handful and then go to the table and just take one out of
it? So you can't do what I just said. What I just said is Asr Gomer. So let's not try to give more examples. That's Asr. Why is what I just said ridiculous? Because in the words of the Machzal Yo, Rafal, you just did Bayer with your eyes closed. It's still Bayer. The Taz never said that. Now what the Taz means, Yikach Stam Min Habal Yadai, needs a definition. But why would that not be Bayer just because I'm not looking? So in the Sefer Ayel Misholosh, he says as follows. Sefer Ayel Misholosh was probably the first Kitzer Sefer written on Hilchos Bayer. And he writes, and he quotes all the Gedolim, Yashiv, etc., as we'll see in a moment. Afilu kishaloikach mikol habal yadai. You take whatever comes to your hand. Va'akarkach, and afterwards, kishahu biyadai. And afterwards, when it is in your hand, misadroi mikayim, you put it in its place. Kam b'zeh asru. Of course, that's asr. V'chayiv. And that's going to be in a Daraisa. As we know in the world of Bayer, if you're missing one condition, it is a Daraisa. And he says, and I asked Rav Yashiv, and I asked him this in Korelitz, V'af lahem hadavar pashit le'isr. There's no question that just to take something without looking doesn't make it not Bayer. And then he writes, the Sefer Machzal Yo writes the same thing, and he quotes Shlomo Zalman as well. So everyone says, almost everyone, but let's say everyone, maybe there's a Chacham Avadia perhaps that deals with this, but let's deal with our Ashkenazi Paiskim. Everyone says, to do what I just did is Asr. But what does the Taz mean? The Taz said something is mutter. So what is this that is mutter? So comes along the Shmir Shabbos Kal Chasai and says the Shmir Shabbos, where the Taz means that if you're Yikach Stam Min Habali Yadai, not for a Bayer purpose, you take something for a different purpose, then you're allowed to put it down where you want. What does that mean? Let's read the Shmir Shabbos and we'll explain in English. Says the Shmir Shabbos, Sikumim, Masalachot, you have cutlery or plates, different sizes and whatnot, Asr Lamainam, you're not allowed to sort them. Very good. And maybe unless you're going to use them right away. Very good. You also can't separate them all. I want to put all the forks here to wash the forks, all the knives here to wash the knives. It's also forbidden. I'm separating it for the purpose of separation. Avol. Here it is. Was allowed. Mutter lehaniach kol kli b'mekaymai le'achar sheshatvai. After you washed it, oinagvai, or you dried it. So I can sort them. After I washed and I dried it, I could then put it down in a separate place. What exactly does that mean? So it comes along the Har on the bottom, and he quotes from the Rebbe of Shem Zalman Arbach as follows. He says, Kivan, when you took it from the tarayvis, the mixture, why did you take it from the mixture? You took it from the mixture because you wanted to wash it. You took it because it's easier. Why did you pick up one item from the pile in the sink? Because you wanted a fork right now? No. You wanted a knife right now? You wanted a spoon right now? No. You picked it up to wash it. You chose anything haphazardly. Once it's in your hand and you're washing it, after you wash it, you can do what you want with it. If we put this into slow motion, it's very simple. I have a pile in front of me of all my cutlery. I picked something up. Why did I pick it up? Did I pick it up to sort it? No. I picked it up to Wash it. Great. I wash it. When I finish washing it, what do I do with it? Whatever I want. So normally, in case A, what did I do? I took it, I put it down. And then I took the next one and I put it down. And what I effectively did is I took a bayur pile from here and I transferred to a new bayur pile over here. But what am I allowed to do? If I pick up an item for a different purpose, a non-bayur purpose, and I wash it, now, what can I do with it? Whatever I want. So now I can take the fork and put it down over here. And then the next item I pick up is a knife. I can wash it and put it down over here. And the next item is a spoon and put it down over here. And then when I finish washing, what am I going to have? All my items separate. Now, I cannot dive in for a specific item. That's the lesser. I can't go and wash all the forks at the same time because I find it easier to wash all the forks. That you can't do. Because then you're bedafka, your lahed, you're explicitly going for a certain item. But if you're going to take it for a different purpose, and Rav Nissan Krelitz writes the exact same thing. Mutter lahaitzi, these are the words of Rav Nissan Krelitz. Mutter lahaitzi kelim mehakiyar, you're allowed to take out an item from the sink. Mikol abali yadai, whatever comes to your hand, kidei lahadicham, to wash it. Afal pi, even though you know in the back of your mind, after you wash it, what are you going to do? You're going to leave it in a different place. You're going to be l'sader kol klibim k'ayim lachad d'chasai. It's pashut, he says from this It's because why are you picking it up? You're picking it up not for a bayrer purpose. So the yesod that we're learning is that it's only going to be bayrer if what? If you're picking up something to do bayrer. But if I'm picking up something not to do bayrer, and now this is the point that one could potentially get messed up over. You need to have a reason why you're picking it up. You can't quote unquote say, oh, I'm picking it up to scratch my back, and you're really just setting the table. That you can't do. But if you're picking it up, I'm going to say it one more time, then we'll take questions. If I'm picking it up for a reason other than a bayrer, I'm allowed to do what I want with it. So now we have two different people. We have sink A and we have sink B. In sink A, someone doesn't know this halacha. Maybe he knows all the halachas in the world. He doesn't know this. So how does he wash his cutlery? He washes them. He puts it down next to him. Now he's a pile of his cutlery. Now if he goes and takes in that piles and sets the table, that's called forbidden. Because when I pick up the fork for that pile, am I doing it for any purpose other than putting it next to my plate as a fork? No. So I'm doing it for a bayr. Now, if someone, let's say, has fancy silverware that they dry them, they drive each one separately, and the reason they dry each one separately is because they feel if I don't dry them, it's going to get those fancy spots that people say on them. They're not fancy spots on the silverware. And if that's what you do, that would also be a purpose, says Rosh Solomon. Drying also could work. The reason I use the example of washing is because not everyone dries it. Some people just let them drip dry. Some people, just rub them out all together, and therefore it's not necessarily the easiest example. But that's case A. In case B, the guy goes, he washes the exact same way, and the only thing he does differently is he doesn't recreate his bayur pile next to him. All he does is he separates them, and then there would be no issue setting the table. Why not? Because there's no bayur anymore. I have my forks here, my knives here, my spoons here, and now with ease, I could set my table. We have 1 minute. Question? No?
Well,
Yeah?
the hector was only
Yeah?
really before you wash them. Once you have
Correct.
a pile of dryness.
Yeah, once you have it in a pile, you're done. There's nothing you can do. Now, once you have a pile, there's another heter, which we don't mention because no one wants to do it. It's called pizer. It's a Rashi in Masechah Shabbos. You could throw the cutlery everywhere. But the problem is, what's called throwing? That's where it gets very, what's called throwing. There were a case in the Gemara was a basket of fruit, and it says, you're lefazer apiros, l'shtoyach, you throw them. So, you want to throw all your cutlery? Maybe. So some people say, no, you don't have to throw it. You could take the stack, and you could slowly drop them across the whole table, and they become separated. It's a big debate in the Achrayim whether that's going to work or not, or whether that's called separating it just slowly, and it's going to be the same Mr. Bayer. But theoretically, that would be a way to do it, which, okay, you don't have to be so violent. You could lie them out on a towel, and you could just, separate them all out over the table. Maybe that would be an eitzah. This is a much simpler eitzah. As long as you know this, you can wash everything the same way, obviously being mindful of all the Shabbos. You can't use hot water, and you can't use whatever type of soap, and you can't use sponges, and you can't, whatever else you want. You can't take a shower, nothing to do with anything. But obviously being mindful of everything else. So you wash the dishes. The only difference is that you're not going to recreate your bayur pile. Yes, question?
So when you want to do this, you have to leave them dirty, then wash them, and then put them on a plate.
You don't, once you're doing this, you can do whatever you want. Once you wash them, they're now separate. Now once they're separate, you can do what you want. You can put them in the drawer. You can set the table. You can put them back in the fancy silverware thing. It's a Hachanah for when? For Shabbos. I'm going to use them tomorrow.
Put them in the drawer?
I'm going to use them tomorrow.
Oh,
If you're cleaning up, that's, correct. Being mindful of all the Shabbos. But again, once they're separate, all we discussed today, part A of this year was be mindful of Hachanah. Part B is if I'm using it for Shabbos, I don't have a Hachanah issue, I have a bayur issue. This is how I get out of the bayur issue. Now you have the same Hachanah heterim. If I'm going to use some of the forks, I can wash all the forks. The same exact thing will apply. And in cutlery world, it's much easier because you end up using spoons and whatnot always, etc.